A highly successful black CEO, Jordan Miles, boarded a flight like any other passenger. He just wanted a peaceful journey after many stressful working days, but as soon as he sat down in the VIP seat that he had paid for, he was asked to leave, just because he didn't look like he belonged there. Just think, if one day, your business card, achievements, respect that you have built up over a lifetime, were wiped out by a cold sentence from a stranger. If you were faced with a choice, stay silent to let the trip continue, or stand up to keep your dignity. If it were you, would you stay silent to let things pass, or would you take action? What makes this story special is not the moment he was offended, but the way he responded. Not loudly, not angrily, but with a choice strong enough to make the entire airline industry stop and look at itself. Are you ready to listen to the journey of a calm man in the midst of a storm and see how he made the whole system change? If you find this story worth pondering, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel to join me in the main content. The morning sun over Denver International Airport had a way of slipping through the long glass panels and warming the waiting area just enough to make people feel calmer than they really were. It was a crisp Friday, the kind of day when travelers stood straighter, moved quicker, and carried the weight of deadlines, reunions, and long-overdue vacations on their shoulders. Inside Gate C-27, the crowd for Skylux Air Flight 708 had begun lining up early. It was a flight known for its quieter cabin and newly upgraded VIP seats, covered in dark almond brown leather that caught the light like polished wood, the kind of seat people worked years to afford. At the far end of the line, a tall black man in a simple charcoal jacket and dark denim jeans stood quietly, holding a boarding pass between two fingers. His name was Jordan Miles. His posture was straight, almost still, as if he'd learned long ago not to rush just because the world around him was in a hurry. To him, patience wasn't slowness, it was discipline. He didn't look like someone who had just finished reviewing a $2.1 billion acquisition proposal that very morning. He didn't look like someone whose signature could influence the future of one of the country's largest aviation companies. He just looked like a man traveling alone, minding his business, carrying a worn leather briefcase that seemed to have as many stories as he did. When the boarding announcement echoed through the gate area, Jordan stepped forward with the rest of Group 1. He moved with a quiet confidence, the kind that didn't ask for attention but naturally drew it, not because he was flashy or loud, but because he carried something deeper, something steady, something self-assured. The attendant scanned his boarding pass without hesitation. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Boim. Miles, enjoy your flight." Jordan nodded with that familiar, gentle half-smile of his. Inside the aircraft, the VIP cabin glowed softly. Ambient lights hummed. A faint scent of cedarwood lingered, part of Skylux's new signature fragrance for premium guests. Jordan walked to seat 1A, placed his briefcase carefully beneath the seat in front of him, then lowered himself into the plush leather seat, exhaling a slow breath. He loved airplanes, not because of the luxury, but because being 35,000 feet in the air had a way of separating him from meetings, reports, negotiations, and expectations. It was the one place where he didn't have to be the man in charge. He could just be a traveler watching the clouds drift by. But peace has always been a fragile thing, and sometimes it breaks without warning. A shadow crossed into the aisle. A woman. Short blonde hair, sharp blue eyes, the stiff posture of someone who believed the cabin belonged to her long before the airline hired her. Her name was Cassandra Hale, the flight's chief purser. Her voice cut through the soft cabin air before Jordan even realized she was speaking. "Sir," she said, tone clipped and chilly, "you're in the wrong seat." Jordan lifted his eyes slowly, almost gently. He didn't move, didn't bristle. He just looked at her with the calm that had gotten him through boardroom battles and backroom deals. "I believe this is seat 1A, he said. And this erased the boarding pass slightly matches the one on my ticket. Cassandra did not even glance at the boarding pass. She folded her arms tightly across her chest. I am familiar with who is assigned to VIP, she replied. You need to move to your correct section. Now. Her now landed like a slap in the quiet cabin. Across the aisle, a man in a navy suit with a thick silver watch. Derek Shaw smirked as if the situation amused him. Jordan didn't look at Derek. His eyes stayed on Cassandra, steady and patient. I assure you, he said softly, this is the seat I purchased. Cassandra leaned in, dropping her voice, but not enough that others couldn't hear. We do not allow passengers to seat themselves in premium cabins based on mistakes or assumptions. A beat. Please gather your belongings. It wasn't what she said. It was how she said it. The kind of voice that assumed guilt before truth, that assumed hierarchy before humanity. Jordan inhaled, slow and deep, the way he'd learned to breathe when life pushed too hard. He remembered his father's voice, deep and calm. Son, never let anyone rush you out of your own dignity. He stayed seated. I'm not moving, he said simply. For a moment, just a moment, something uneasy flickered in Cassandra's eyes. A hesitation. Maybe. Or disbelief that someone she labeled as lesser dared refuse her. Derek clicked his tongue loudly. Just follow instructions. Man, he muttered. These seats aren't open for confusion. Jordan turned his head slightly, meeting Derek's stare without anger, without fear. There's no confusion here, Jordan said, his tone steady. None at all. It wasn't defiance. It wasn't aggression. It was clarity, a kind of stillness that unsettles people who rely on authority instead of respect. 2 rows back, a young woman. Dark hair pulled into a messy bun. Phone in hand, raised her camera just enough to capture the interaction. Her name was Maya Lopez. She wasn't trying to start trouble. She was trying to catch a moment she had seen far too many times in her community. Her live stream started with only 15 viewers, then 30, then 80. Cassandra noticed the phone and snapped. Turn that off. This is a private cabin. Maya didn't lower her camera. With all due respect, she said quietly, public behavior isn't private. A hush swept through the VIP cabin like a breeze before a storm. Jordan looked around. The eyes that met his were not hostile, just uncomfortable, silent, waiting. Waiting for him to comply. Waiting for him to take the fall so the plane could depart on time. Waiting the way society too often waits for the wrong person to bend so the wrong person in power doesn't have to. Jordan leaned back into the leather seat. His voice barely rose above a whisper. I bought this seat. I boarded correctly. I won't stand up because someone believes I don't belong here. His words weren't loud, but they landed heavier than any shout could. Cassandra stiffened. If you refuse to cooperate, she said sharply, I will call airport security. Beside her, Derek sighed dramatically, like an impatient child. Finally, somebody who knows the rules. Jordan lowered his gaze for a moment. A brief moment. The kind where a lifetime of memories flickered through moments when doors were closed on him, moments when he was judged before he spoke, moments he rose above because rising was the only choice that ever mattered. And under all of that, one thought beat steady. Here we go again. He looked up. His calm returned like a tide. You do what you need to do, he said, but I won't give up my seat. Maya's live stream hit 2,000 viewers. Cassandra tapped her radio. The cabin went silent. Jordan exhaled long and slow, the kind of exhale that comes from a man who knows he is stepping into something bigger than inconvenience, bigger than this plane, bigger than this day, something that would soon change everything, for everyone. The hum inside the cabin had changed. It was no longer the soft drone of an aircraft preparing for takeoff, but something tighter, something strained. as if every breath carried a question no one wanted to voice. Jordan Miles stayed seated in Wenday, his fingers resting lightly on the armrest, the leather warm beneath his hand. He watched the small reflections of cabin lights flicker across the window, the shimmer of metal on the wing outside. Everything around him looked calm, yet nothing felt calm. Cassandra Hale stood rigid, her jaw tense, the radio still in her hand. There was a flicker of doubt in her posture, though she tried to hide it under years of practiced authority. She was a person who believed order came from obedience. Passenger compliance was her armor. Any challenge to that order, especially from someone she had already placed in a certain mental category, felt like a threat. Jordan could see that. He had seen versions of Cassandra throughout his life, people who clung to their sense of control because they feared what might happen without it. He felt a faint sadness press against his ribs. Not anger, only sadness. He wished she could see him for who he was, not who she assumed him to be. Behind his seat, a man adjusted his glasses, whispering to his partner. A woman clutched her purse as if the tension might spill onto her. Maya Lopez kept filming, her voice low but steady as she narrated what was happening. Viewer numbers continued climbing, the little icons on her screen moving like sparks caught on wind. Cassandra finally broke the silence. "Since you insist on remaining in that seat," she said, "security will verify your ticket and identity outside the aircraft." Jordan's voice remained soft. "I've already presented both." "You presented them to me," she snapped, "not to security." Jordan blinked once, slowly. "Is there any reason you believe my documents are invalid?" Cassandra inhaled with sharp precision. "Passengers occasionally attempt to sit in cabins they have not purchased." The unspoken assumption filled the space like smoke. Maya whispered into her phone. She didn't even check. She just assumed. Derek shifted in his seat, rolling his eyes dramatically. "Why are we still talking about this? This is wasting everyone's time. Let the crew do their job." The impatience in his voice sent a small ripple of discomfort through nearby passengers. Several looked away, pretending they had no part in what was unfolding. Others fixated on the floor or the windows or the safety card in front of them, anything to avoid witnessing something that might tug at their conscience. Jordan stayed still, perfectly still, not frozen, not intimidated, simply anchored. He thought of his father again, remembering evenings at the gas station where he used to help restock shelves. His father's voice echoed clear in memory. "Strength isn't in the volume of your voice, it's in the steadiness of your ground." That steadiness filled him now. A tone sounded from the cabin speakers, a gentle chime, the kind that usually meant a polite reminder for passengers to take their seats. This time, it carried a different weight, almost eerie under the tension. The captain's voice came over the intercom, calm but tentative. "Ladies and gentlemen, we ask for your patience as a situation in the forward cabin is being resolved." Maya recorded that too. Comments flooded faster than she could read. "This feels wrong. Why won't they check his ticket properly? They didn't question anyone else in that cabin." Jordan lowered his eyes, not in defeat, but in reflection. He wondered how many times in his life he had been asked to prove himself, to validate something that others accepted at face value for people who looked different. He wondered how many people in the world lived that same script without cameras or witnesses or anyone to say, "That isn't fair." Cassandra took a step closer to him. "I am giving you one final opportunity to comply without escalation." Jordan answered with a quiet depth. "You are not giving me an opportunity. You are demanding surrender." She frowned sharply. "This is not surrender. This is procedure." He held her gaze. "Procedure applies to everyone. Yet you questioned no one else." Cassandra's face tightened, a wall rising behind her eyes. "This is not about race," she hissed under her breath. Jordan didn't raise his voice. It rarely ever is. according to the person in power. Her mouth twitched, a tiny tremor in the corner, a sign that his words had landed. Security Chief Norman Grant appeared at the cabin entrance. His uniform was neat, his posture tired. He looked like a man who had seen too many situations that made him uneasy. When Cassandra gestured him forward, Norman approached Jordan cautiously. "Sir, I need you to step off the aircraft so I can verify your travel documents." Jordan met Norman's eyes. Something in the officer's expression felt conflicted, as if he already knew the request was unnecessary. "I've already provided my documents to the crew," Jordan replied. Norman shifted uncomfortably. "I understand. But we need to follow certain guidelines." Jordan's inner voice churned softly, not in anger, but in contemplation. How many times had he been told that line? How many times had guidelines been used as a shield for people who didn't realize how easily those shields could become weapons? He spoke with gentle clarity. Guidelines exist to keep order. They don't exist to excuse prejudice. That sentence left Norman visibly shaken. He swallowed hard, his eyes darting between Jordan and Cassandra. "Please," Norman whispered, "just step outside for a moment. This will go faster for everyone." Jordan stood slowly, a movement so deliberate it quieted even Derek's impatience. He reached for his briefcase with care, the soft click of the handle sounding louder than it should have. As he rose, the cabin lights reflected in his eyes, catching something that wasn't anger but a weary resolve. A woman, a few seats behind, whispered, "This isn't right." Another murmured, "Why isn't anyone speaking up?" But no one stood. No one intervened. Silence wrapped the cabin like a heavy blanket. Jordan stepped into the aisle. Every footstep carried the weight of a history he had never asked to carry. He felt the eyes on him, the heaviness of their silence, the discomfort people felt when witnessing unfairness they didn't want to admit was happening. Maya filmed, her hand trembling slightly as she followed his movement. Her voice cracked when she said, "This shouldn't be happening." Jordan paused beside her seat. He spoke softly, only to her, though the live stream caught every syllable. Sometimes the quiet moments matter most. People see more clearly when the noise stops. Then he walked toward the cabin door. His calm was not resignation. It was a choice, a powerful one. When the door opened and the cool air of the jet bridge brushed against his face, he felt something shift deep within him, something that whispered that this was no longer a simple travel inconvenience. This was the beginning of a reckoning the airline didn't know it had walked into. Jordan stepped off the plane without looking back. He didn't need to. He knew the world had already seen enough, and it was only the beginning. Jordan Miles stepped onto the jet bridge, carrying the weight of a moment he had never planned for, yet recognized all too well. The air inside that narrow passage felt different from the cabin he had just left. Cooler. Sharper. It smelled faintly of metal and the recycled scent of the terminal beyond. A place where people walked with rolling luggage and half-formed thoughts, unaware of the tension that had unfolded just a few feet away. Norman Grant followed close behind, his steps heavy. The officer looked as if he were carrying something even he didn't fully understand. A mix of duty and discomfort twisting beneath his uniform. His voice came out low. "Sir, if I could just take a quick look at your ID again?" Jordan handed it over without a word, not from submission, but from clarity. There were battles worth fighting with words, and there were battles worth fighting with silence. He understood the difference well. Norman studied the ID for longer than necessary. His brow furrowed, not in suspicion, but in a kind of troubled recognition that this scene should not have happened at all. "I don't see an issue," he murmured. "Everything is valid." Jordan met his gaze. It was valid on the plane, too. Norman's shoulders sagged slightly, the truth of that statement landing harder than any accusation. He lowered his voice even further. "I know." That admission lingered between them. Not an apology. Not yet. But something close. Something honest. From inside the aircraft. The faint murmur of whispers leaked through the still-open door. Someone coughed. Someone sighed. Someone shifted in their seat, restless with the awkwardness of having witnessed something they wished they could unsee, or pretend wasn't real. Maya Lopez was still streaming. Her camera pointed toward the aisle, capturing the silence that had fallen over the front cabin after Jordan exited. Viewers typed frantically, "Why didn't anyone help him? She didn't even check his ticket. This is unbelievable." Inside 1A, the seat Jordan had occupied sat empty, almost strangely so, as if the absence of his calm presence created a hollow space that the leather itself couldn't fill. Cassandra Hale stood near the front galley, arms rigid at her sides, chest rising and falling with frustration. Her eyes darted toward Maya's camera and then back toward the cockpit door, searching for support she hoped would justify her decisions. But the support did not come. Derek Shaw leaned back smugly in his seat, tapping his fingers on the armrest, convinced that everything happening was just part of an orderly procedure. People like him rarely questioned procedures that worked in their favor. Jordan waited in the jet bridge as Norman finished scanning his ID against a tablet device. The small screen glowed a soft green, signaling everything was clear. Norman swallowed, wrestling with something inside him. He spoke softly, almost painfully. "I wish there were another way this could have gone." Jordan responded with the quiet strength he had learned over a lifetime. "There is always another way. It just starts with someone choosing differently." Norman looked down, the weight of that truth settling deep, perhaps deeper than he expected. A few seconds passed, not rushed, not dramatic, just heavy with the kind of reflection that comes only when a person confronts a piece of themselves they didn't know was there. When Norman finally stepped back, he said, "You're free to reboard after I speak with the crew." Jordan did not nod. He simply tucked his ID back into his wallet, his movement slow and steady, a habit formed from years of refusing to let anyone rush his dignity. Inside the cabin, Cassandra paced in a tight line, her face drawn. She told herself she had done the right thing. She told herself she was enforcing order. She told herself she was preventing disruption. But beneath the repetition of those thoughts, a quieter voice asked a different question, one she pushed down each time it surfaced. What if I judged him before anything else? She crossed her arms defensively, trying to quiet the unease. Maya continued filming, her voice soft but steady for the thousands now watching. He was calm the whole time, never raised his voice. He just wanted to sit in the seat he paid for. Someone behind her whispered, "Maybe we should say something." But no one spoke. Jordan's absence had created a mirror in that cabin, and the reflection was not flattering. Norman reappeared at the doorway, his expression conflicted. He approached Cassandra and spoke in a hushed tone that still carried enough weight for those nearby to sense the tension. "His documents are valid." Cassandra stiffened. "I need him moved," she insisted. He refused instructions. That violates the rules for passenger compliance. Norman hesitated. He looked back toward the jet bridge where Jordan waited in stillness. His voice lowered. There was no violation. "You never verified anything before escalating." Cassandra's eyes flashed with defensiveness. "I made a judgment call." Norman answered quietly. "Yes, you did." Jordan could hear fragments of the exchange from where he stood. He didn't need the full conversation. The tone told him everything. The strain, the pride, the refusal to acknowledge what everyone already knew. He felt a familiar heaviness rise in his chest. He had lived this pattern far too many times, in boardrooms, at hotel counters, at networking events where he was mistaken for support staff until he took the stage as the keynote speaker. Yet this moment felt different. Not because it hurt more, but because he sensed an unfolding, Something that had begun long before he stepped onto that plane, and something that would continue long after he stepped off it. Norman returned to Jordan, his eyes carrying defeat. "She's refusing to seat you in VIP," he said carefully. "She's requesting we arrange an alternate seat." "Alternate," Jordan repeated quietly. "Not equal." Norman exhaled slow regret. "They want to move you to Standard Plus." A hum of disbelief rose from the livestream chat. Jordan stood motionless. His silence deepened into something else, something more reflective than resigned. A quiet clarity washed over him, a reminder of who he was beyond this moment, beyond the narrow assumptions of strangers. "I won't accept another seat," he said. Norman nodded, though his eyes carried sorrow. "I figured you'd say that." Jordan looked toward the cabin door, hearing the soft shuffle of feet, the uneasy glances from passengers who wished the conflict would end but didn't want to confront what they had witnessed. His thoughts drifted briefly to the documents inside his briefcase, the acquisition plans, the signatures pending, the structural assessment of Skylux Air that he had been reviewing privately. He hadn't boarded this plane to expose anyone. He hadn't boarded it to make a point. He had boarded it to observe, to learn, and life had delivered the lesson early. He turned toward Norman again and said, "Thank you for doing what you could." Norman looked at him with an expression that mixed regret and respect. "I'm sorry," he whispered. Jordan offered a single calm nod, not to dismiss the apology, but to acknowledge the human beneath the uniform. He stepped away from the jet bridge rail, the soft thud of his footsteps echoing against the metal floor. His posture remained steady, the kind of steadiness that made people look twice, not because he demanded attention, but because he carried something unshakable. He walked toward the terminal with a quiet purpose, unaware that Maya's livestream had just surpassed 8,000 viewers, unaware that comments were filling with outrage, unaware that the video would spread faster than wildfire once it left the gate area. All he knew in that moment was that the situation was not over. Not for him, not for the airline, not for the world watching. This was merely the part of the story where the air grew still before the storm revealed its true size. The terminal hummed with its usual movements, footsteps tapping along polished tiles, muted conversations drifting from every direction. Yet, within that steady rhythm, Jordan Miles walked as if he were moving through a different world entirely. The air felt thicker, his thoughts heavier. Each step carried a quiet recognition of something he had long understood, yet never fully accepted. Injustice rarely announces itself loudly. It arrives through familiar voices, familiar assumptions, familiar silences. Behind him, the aircraft door remained open. Maya Lopez still streamed the cabin, her phone trembling slightly as she tried to keep a steady frame. She moved her camera closer to the aisle, capturing Cassandra Hale pacing near the galley with an expression that betrayed frustration and a hint of unease. Maya's whisper carried through her microphone. He didn't even raise his voice. Not once. Thousands of viewers watched the empty seat in 1A as if it were an ache, a small wound carved into leather. The absence said more than any argument could. Jordan stopped walking as he reached the terminal's wide viewing window. Planes waited silently on the tarmac, some glinting in the light, others with maintenance crews moving around them. He rested a hand on the glass, letting the cool surface calm the warmth in his chest. His pulse wasn't fast, just steady, like his resolve. He closed his eyes for a brief moment, not to escape, to listen, to the sound of his inner voice, to the memory of his father's lessons, to the reminder that dignity is not something others grant, it is something you carry. A burst of chatter started behind him. Maya had stepped off the plane with her camera still on, her face pale with adrenaline. She slowed when she spotted Jordan standing at the window, as if unsure whether to approach. When she did, her voice came out gentler than before. "Sir, are you okay?" Jordan turned, his expression calm. "I've been through worse." Maya swallowed, not satisfied with that answer. I've seen things like this happen to people in my family. At stores, at hotels, at the airport. But this is the first time I've seen someone stay that calm. Most people would have shouted. Jordan held her gaze. There was no pride in his eyes, no victory, only a reflective sadness softened by experience. "Anger burns fast," he said quietly, "but clarity lasts longer." The chat on Maya's livestream exploded with reactions. Viewers typed rapidly, some praising Jordan, others expressing fury at the airline. The number kept climbing, the little icon showing nearly 10,000 watching in real time. A Skylux gate agent approached them with hesitant steps. Her name tag read, Eleanor Brooks. She looked young, perhaps in her late 20s, with eyes that held more empathy than authority. "Mr. Miles." Her voice wavered. "I saw what happened. I'm so sorry." Jordan nodded quietly. Eleanor wrung her hands together. "Corporate won't want this. Not if it reaches the media." Maya lifted her phone a little higher. "It already has." Eleanor's breath caught. She didn't seem surprised, only saddened that something this preventable had unfolded so quickly. Jordan reached into his pocket and retrieved his boarding pass. He stared at it for a moment, as if studying the paper itself might reveal how a simple flight became something heavier. "I purchased a seat," he said. "I boarded like every other passenger, but I wasn't treated like every other passenger." Eleanor's voice softened. "I believe you." Behind Jordan, another small crowd had formed. People who had deboarded early or changed flights drifted closer, drawn by Maya's live stream and by the subtle electricity of truth beginning to surface. Jordan didn't seek their attention. He didn't speak loudly. He simply existed in a moment that forced reflection on anyone who watched. Norman Grant emerged from the jet bridge, his stance weighted with responsibility. He approached Jordan slowly, pausing when their eyes met. The officer looked older than he had earlier, as if the incident had peeled back a layer he preferred not to confront. "I spoke with the captain," he said. "He's aware now." Jordan waited. "They're going to make a final decision on whether you can reboard." Jordan let the words settle. "They shouldn't have to make that decision," he replied. "The ticket already did." Norman nodded, helpless. Jordan considered the officer for a few seconds. He sensed Norman's internal struggle, the tug-of-war between protocol and conscience. Jordan knew that feeling well. Many people, even decent ones, defaulted to silence when pressured by authority. He placed a hand briefly on the rail beside him and looked past Norman toward the gate. "Is the plane leaving soon?" he asked. "Not until this is resolved," Norman answered. Maya stepped closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "They're trying to figure out what to do because they don't want the video to get worse." Jordan gave her a small, rueful smile. "The truth doesn't get worse. It just becomes harder to hide." Through the gate door, Cassandra appeared. Her expression was tight, her lips a firm line. Derek followed behind, visibly irritated, muttering under his breath. Their presence caused a ripple through the nearby crowd. Derek stopped when he realized several people were filming him. What he snapped, "You all act like he was the only one inconvenienced." Jordan regarded him quietly, not replying. Silence was its own kind of mirror, and Derek's reflection in it was not flattering. Cassandra cleared her throat and addressed Norman. "The captain agrees that for the safety and order of the flight, the passengers should be reassigned." Jordan spoke gently. "You mean displaced?" Cassandra avoided his eyes. "Sir, we're offering you another seat." Jordan waited. Standard plus. He allowed the words to rest between them. Those two simple syllables carried the full measure of her assumption, her discomfort, her refusal to see him beyond the surface she chose. "No," Jordan said softly. That single word was not harsh, not angry. It felt like the steady closing of a door that had been open too long. Passengers in the gate area watched the scene unfold with wide eyes. Some whispered in sympathy. Others shifted uncomfortably, unsure whether to intervene. The tension grew thick, yet Jordan's presence steadied it with an almost disarming calm. Norman stepped forward, his voice low. "Mr. Miles, if you refuse the reassignment, they will have to remove you from the flight entirely." Jordan's answer was simple. "I won't sit anywhere but the seat I purchased." Maya spoke to her viewers, her voice trembling with a mix of outrage and admiration. "He's not fighting. He's not yelling. He's just standing by what's right." Jordan looked at her and gave a small nod of gratitude. He knew what was coming. But he also knew that moments like these didn't just reveal character. They revealed systems, assumptions, blind spots. Norman drew a slow breath. "Mr. Miles, they're asking you to step away from the gate." Jordan turned toward the viewing window once more. The Skylux logo gleamed on the aircraft, bold and confident, as if unaware of the storm building beneath its wings. He gathered the strap of his briefcase into his hand. "Very well." His voice carried no bitterness, only truth. A truth that echoed far deeper than anyone around him realized. As he walked away from the gate, Maya's camera followed him for several seconds before she lowered it slowly, almost reverently. The chat exploded with outrage, disbelief, solidarity. Jordan kept walking. He didn't hurry. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. The world had already seen enough. Jordan Miles walked deeper into the terminal, leaving behind the noise of passengers, the glare of phone screens, and the raw tension that clung to the gate area like static. He moved toward a quieter section near a row of empty seats overlooking the tarmac. The glass stretched wide, reflecting streaks of light across his silhouette, the planes in motion beyond him like silent giants drifting across the concrete. He lowered himself into one of the chairs, placing his briefcase beside him. His hands rested on his knees, his posture calm but weighted. He gazed ahead, eyes softening with a distant thought, a memory tugging faintly at him. For a moment, he allowed the stillness to wrap around him. Maya Lopez approached slowly. The camera finally lowered, no longer streaming. Her steps carried hesitation, as if she feared she might intrude on a moment that wasn't hers to touch. "Mr. Miles," she said quietly. Jordan looked up. His expression remained steady, not cold, simply reflective. "You don't have to stay," he told her gently. Maya shook her head. "I don't want to walk away from something this wrong." Jordan studied her face. The sincerity there softened something inside him. "Thank you," he said. Maya sat a seat away from him, giving him respectful space. They watched the tarmac together, silent for a time. The distant rumble of taxiing planes vibrated through the floor, a low thrum that matched the slow beat of Jordan's thoughts. Maya spoke first. "I keep thinking, if I hadn't filmed, nobody would believe this happened the way it did." Jordan exhaled gently. "People often believe what's comfortable, not what's true." Maya nodded slowly. "My dad used to tell me that some truths need witnesses." Jordan felt that line settle inside him. He looked toward the runway again. "Your father was wise." A pause passed between them, quiet but full. Maya leaned forward slightly. "Do you think they'll try to fix it?" "The airline." Jordan didn't answer immediately. His mind sifted through experiences, decisions, boardroom politics, the complex interplay between profit, power, and accountability. He thought of executives who spoke of equity but acted only when their brand was threatened. He thought of the weight of silence from those who should have stood up. "I think," he said slowly, "that companies protect what they fear losing. Sometimes that's money. sometimes reputation, sometimes, if you're lucky, it's their conscience. Before Maya could respond, a familiar voice approached from behind them. Mr. Miles? It was Eleanor Brooks, the young gate agent. Her hands were clasped nervously, her eyes filled with a mixture of concern and quiet admiration. She looked as though she wasn't sure if she had the right to speak. Jordan turned toward her. Yes, Eleanor glanced around to make sure no supervisors were watching. Her voice came out hushed. I just talked to someone inside the operations office, she said. They're trying to contain the situation. Corporate already saw the stream. Jordan raised an eyebrow slightly. That was quick. They're scared, she added. They don't know how far the video'll spread, Maya muttered softly. Too late. Eleanor swallowed, gathering courage. They shouldn't have done that to you, she said. I know it's not my place, but I wanted to tell you that. Jordan's gaze softened. You didn't do anything wrong. Eleanor looked down. Maybe, but I stood there and didn't speak up when I saw it happen. Jordan studied the young woman for a long moment. He saw honesty in her posture, the kind that didn't hide behind excuses. Sometimes people freeze, he said. Sometimes they stay silent because they don't know how to do the right thing without risking something. Eleanor blinked. I guess that's true. Jordan looked out the window again. Doing nothing still costs something, he said quietly. Usually later, when regret comes. Eleanor nodded, her eyes glistening. I'll remember that. Another ripple of movement pulled their attention. Norman Grant stepped into view again, his expression weighed down by the burden of decisions he didn't enjoy carrying. He approached Jordan with the kind of careful steps that spoke of respect mixed with reluctance. Mr. Miles, Norman began. The flight is being reassigned to another crew. Jordan tilted his head slightly. Because of what happened, Norman hesitated. Because the captain doesn't want the conflict on his flight report. They're calling in replacements. That detail carried quiet significance. Jordan felt it settle inside him like a puzzle piece falling into place. What about Ms. Hale, he asked. Norman pressed his lips together. She's been asked to wait in the crew lounge pending instructions. He didn't say whether she was being disciplined. He didn't have to. Jordan sensed the unraveling of a chain of decisions behind closed doors, Maya whispered. Her shift is probably over. Jordan shook his head gently. No, something else is happening. Norman took a breath. That's not all, he said. Corporate asked for you to be escorted to the VIP lounge. They want to discuss the incident directly. Maya's eyes widened. They want a meeting. Norman nodded. They want to handle it fast. Jordan leaned back slightly. He could feel the tension around them shift, almost like wind changing direction before a storm. He sensed urgency spreading inside the airline's internal network, decisions being made in rooms where panic met strategy. He rose to his feet slowly, rolling his shoulders once, resetting his composure. I'll speak with them, he said. Maya stood as well. Do you want me to come? Jordan smiled faintly. No. This part isn't yours to carry. But Maya wasn't ready to let go. I'll keep streaming. I'll keep telling people what happened. Jordan nodded. That matters too. Norman gestured gently toward the escalator leading upward. This way, sir. Jordan collected his briefcase and walked with him. His pace was unhurried, his posture steady. People in the terminal turned to watch, whispers following him like a soft trail. Some recognized his face from the live stream. Others simply sensed something important unfolding. As the group moved toward the VIP lounge, Eleanor lingered behind. She watched Jordan's figure disappear into the crowd. His silence had more gravity than any raised voice she had ever heard. Something about the steadiness of his steps stirred her. Not guilt. Something deeper. Hope. Maya lifted her phone again, speaking softly to her audience. He's going to the VIP lounge to meet with corporate. I think something big is about to happen. The comments flooded in. He deserves justice. Hold them accountable. Thank you for showing us the truth. Upstairs, the frosted doors of the lounge slid open. Jordan stepped inside. Soft lighting glowed across polished wood. Cushioned seats and quiet corners meant for travelers who never expected conflict. Today, however, the air inside was different. Corporate representatives were waiting. Jordan paused for a single breath, letting calm settle deep inside him. He understood something clearly now. The moment he was removed from his seat had been the spark. But this meeting, this would be the quake. The frosted doors of the Skylux VIP lounge slid shut behind Jordan Miles, sealing the world outside with a soft hiss. The room was quiet, intentionally so, designed for privacy and comfort, not confrontation. Low lamps cast warm light across polished shelves, muted paintings, and plush seating arranged with meticulous symmetry. It felt like a place meant for people untouched by conflict. Yet conflict waited inside it now. 3 individuals stood near a long oak table. Their attire carried the unmistakable tone of corporate hierarchy. Pressed suits, tense postures, eyes that flickered between regret and calculation. The man in the center stepped forward first. "Mr. Miles," he said, extending a stiff hand. "I'm Charles Redwood, Senior Vice President of Operations." Jordan shook his hand calmly. "Mr. Redwood." A woman to his left introduced herself with a quiet breath. "I'm Linda Carrington, Director of Customer Integrity and Compliance." A younger man adjacent to her spoke last, Caleb Owens, Corporate Communications. Jordan sensed their unease immediately. Not fear of him, exactly. More the fear of a story slipping out of their control. Charles gestured to the nearest seating area. "Please, have a seat. We appreciate you speaking with us." Jordan lowered himself into the chair with deliberate calm. The 3 executives took seats opposite him, forming a small semicircle that felt more like a tribunal than a meeting. Charles folded his hands. "First, we want to express our apologies for what occurred. It should not have happened. Our crew made several misjudgments." Jordan met his gaze without blinking. They weren't misjudgments. They were assumptions. Charles stiffened. Linda cleared her throat. "We understand how the situation may have appeared." Jordan's voice came out steady. "It didn't appear. It happened." The blunt truth interrupted the script Linda had come prepared with. She looked down at her clasped hands. Caleb shifted uncomfortably. His tablet lay on the table, displaying paused clips from Maya's livestream. The thumbnail showed Jordan stepping into the jet bridge, calm despite everything pressing against him. Caleb spoke next, choosing his words carefully. "The video is circulating rapidly. It's gaining substantial traction. We're monitoring the spread." Jordan leaned back slightly. "Your concern seems to be the video, not the moment that created it." Charles exhaled, the edge of impatience tugging at him. "Mr. Miles, we're trying to address the matter responsibly." "Responsibly," Jordan repeated softly, "by summoning me here instead of addressing your system." The room cooled with silence. Jordan's gaze remained even, calm. He knew this type of meeting well. Corporate damage control always came in the form of polished apologies wrapped in neutral language. But what Cassandra Hale had done wasn't neutral. Neither was the silence of those who watched. Linda finally lifted her eyes. "We'd like to understand what you feel would be the appropriate course of action." Jordan studied her carefully. "What I feel," he said, "is that your company does not understand what happened at all." Charles frowned. The crew made an error. "It wasn't an error," Jordan interrupted gently. "It was a pattern, a familiar one." Charles opened his mouth to argue but hesitated. Sensing the steadiness behind Jordan's words, Jordan continued, "Your chief purser never checked my documents. She made a decision before she saw anything. She believed authority gave her the right to decide who belonged where." Linda flinched. Caleb remained silent. Jordan leaned forward slightly. "Tell me, what part of that is an error?" No one answered. Outside the lounge's large glass wall, a Skylux aircraft taxied slowly across the tarmac. Its lights cast shifting glimmers across the polished floor. The imagery felt symbolic, a brand moving forward while a truth unfolded quietly behind closed doors. Charles inhaled deeply. "We understand the gravity," he said. "We want to correct this." How Jordan asked. The question flattened the room. Charles exchanged a glance with Linda, who seemed unwilling to speak. Caleb finally broke the silence. "We'd like to offer compensation," he said softly. "A full refund, complimentary upgrades for future travel, and a private written apology from the airline." Jordan's eyes held steady. "That isn't accountability." Caleb shifted. "We're trying to reach an understanding." Jordan clasped his hands, grounding his voice with intent. "An understanding would require acknowledgement, not transactions." Linda finally lifted her head again. "What would you have us acknowledge?" Jordan inhaled quietly. "That what happened wasn't a customer service failure. It was a human failure. A failure of training, culture, and assumptions. A failure that could happen to any person who looks like me." The executives sat motionless, absorbing the weight of his words. Jordan continued, his voice soft but resonant. "I'm not asking for a refund. I'm asking for recognition. That your system needs change, and that change requires more than shifting blame onto one crew member." Charles shifted in his seat. What would that change involve? In your view, Jordan opened his briefcase slowly. The soft click of the latch punctuated the air. He withdrew a thin folder, black with silver lettering on the cover. The material inside was prepared long before this incident. He had been studying Skylux for weeks, though for reasons unrelated to what just happened. He placed the folder on the table. "I began auditing Skylux Air on behalf of my firm," he said, "for a potential acquisition." The three executives froze. Jordan's voice stayed calm. This incident occurred before the audit was complete, but it revealed more than any data report could. Charles swallowed, his expression draining of color. You're with Miles Global Holdings." Jordan raised an eyebrow. "You didn't look." Linda covered her mouth, stunned. Miles Global Holdings was not merely a company. It was one of the largest private equity firms in North America. A firm known for ethical overhauls, structural reforms, and forcing companies to confront the gaps between their values and their actions. Jordan spoke slowly. "I boarded that plane as a paying customer, not as your evaluator, not as a potential investor. But you showed me exactly what your culture looks like under pressure." The executives looked shaken. Jordan let a quiet moment settle before continuing. "I came to this meeting not to test you, not to threaten you, but to give you one chance to acknowledge what happened." The weight of that hung in the room. Caleb stuttered softly. "What? What happens if we don't?" Jordan met his gaze with calm clarity. "If you don't, Skylux will face the same reality every company faces when it pretends problems don't exist." His voice dropped to a near whisper. "The truth will become your reputation. No anger, no raised tone, just truth. The kind of truth that shifts something in the air." Linda leaned forward, voice trembling. "What do you want from us?" Jordan's expression softened, though his resolve did not. "A conversation with your board." Charles blinked. "The board." Jordan nodded. "Yes. Before this becomes something larger than any of us." Charles glanced toward Linda and Caleb. The anxiety on their faces confirmed they understood the magnitude. Jordan rose to his feet with quiet dignity. When people are treated unfairly, they remember. When companies ignore it, the world remembers too. The room sat still, as if every breath held a question the future alone could answer. Jordan reached for his briefcase. "I'll wait for your decision." He stepped toward the door. His movements carried the calm certainty of a man who had nothing to prove, only truth to stand on. And the truth was already unfolding across the world outside that glass. Jordan Miles stepped out of the VIP lounge and found himself in a corridor lined with tall windows. The faint glow from the tarmac painted quiet streaks across the floor. His pulse was steady, but something deep within him felt unsettled, not from fear, but from the weight of what he had set into motion. He walked slowly toward a quieter corner, a space with a few armchairs and a small table stacked with travel magazines. From there, he could see the runway clearly. Planes drifted in measured lines, their wings catching the orange light. It was a view usually meant to soothe travelers, not to hold the tension of an unfolding reckoning. He sat down, resting his briefcase at his side. For a moment, he let his mind drift back to earlier years, to moments when he had been overlooked, dismissed, doubted. A hotel clerk insisting he must be in the wrong line. A conference sponsor assuming he was there to carry equipment. Investors who looked at his resume, then at his skin, and treated the resume as a suggestion rather than a fact. Each memory rose like a soft echo. None were loud, yet together they formed a pattern that shaped the world he had learned to navigate with grace. He closed his eyes briefly, listening not to the noises around him, but to the hum inside his own thoughts. For the first time since stepping off the plane, he wondered what his father would say if he were here. Probably something simple, something steady. "Don't let them shrink your truth." Jordan breathed out slowly. Footsteps approached from behind. It was Maya Lopez again, her expression both anxious and determined. She had ended the live stream at the request of airport staff, but her phone was still in her hand, screen lighting up with notifications she couldn't keep up with. "People are furious," Maya said softly. "They're demanding answers. Reporters are already contacting me." Jordan opened his eyes and looked at her carefully. "You don't need to carry that burden. I'm not carrying it alone," she replied. "People saw everything. They're not letting it go." Jordan nodded once, appreciation flickering gently across his expression. Before they could say more, another presence appeared. Eleanor Brooks walked toward them, visibly nervous. Her fingers twisted into each other. She glanced around before speaking, as if expecting someone to reprimand her for even approaching. "Mr. Miles," she said. "Corporate asked me to bring you water, but I wanted to check on you." Jordan gave her a kind look. "I'm fine." Eleanor's voice shook slightly. "You shouldn't have had to be." Her honesty lingered like a small light in a dim room. Maya added, "They're scrambling inside the operations office. I saw 3 supervisors rush past. Something's happening." Eleanor nodded. "They're calling senior leadership. The board might be notified." Jordan sat back slowly. His silence wasn't passive. It was decisive. Eleanor hesitated before continuing. "There's one more thing I think you should know." She swallowed. "Some crew members from your flight filed a preliminary report saying you were uncooperative. They're trying to protect themselves." Jordan blinked once, letting the information settle. "They're rewriting the narrative already," Maya whispered. Jordan didn't look surprised. "It's not unusual," he said. "Systems protect their own." Eleanor clasped her hands tighter. "But I told the operations supervisor that wasn't true. I told them exactly what I saw." Jordan's gaze warmed. That took courage. Eleanor's eyes glistened. I didn't want silence to win again. Before Jordan could respond, another figure approached. Norman Grant. His shoulders looked heavier than earlier, as if the weight of an entire department rested there. His steps were measured, but there was an urgency beneath the surface. "Mr. Miles," Norman said, "things upstairs are escalating." Jordan waited calmly. "Corporate leadership is holding an emergency call." Norman continued, "Your name came up, and the video. It's spreading faster than anything they've dealt with," Maya whispered. "Good." Norman sighed. "They're worried about legal consequences, PR fallout, stock impact." Jordan looked at him closely. "What are you worried about?" "Officer Grant." Norman hesitated, taken aback by the question. "I'm worried about the truth," he finally admitted, "and how it gets handled when people are scared." Jordan respected that answer. Norman lowered his voice. "Mr. Miles, you should know something else. The captain from your flight filed his own observation. He said there was no safety issue and no refusal of commands. He said the removal wasn't justified." Maya's eyes widened. "He told the truth." Norman nodded slowly. "Yes, and that completely contradicts what the purser tried to claim." Eleanor's breath caught. "That means someone's in trouble." Jordan spoke quietly. "Truth doesn't cause trouble. It reveals it." The corridor fell still. Jordan's phone vibrated lightly. He glanced down at the screen. One message from Marcus Hale, his chief strategy officer. "Call me. Board wants updates." And, "The public is demanding a statement from you." Jordan turned the phone face down beside him. He wasn't ready to speak publicly. "Not yet." Norman shifted his stance. "Corporate asked if you're willing to wait a bit longer. They're preparing next steps." Jordan looked out the window again, toward the aircraft he had been forced to leave. The plane had been moved from the gate. A maintenance truck stood beside it, though Jordan doubted maintenance had anything to do with its delay. He spoke softly. "I'll wait." Eleanor breathed out in relief, as if grateful he wasn't walking away. Norman glanced at both women before stepping closer to Jordan. "Mr. Miles, I know you didn't ask for any of this. I know you were just trying to fly like everyone else. But what's happening now? It's going to change something, whether Skylux wants it to or not." Jordan lifted his gaze. "I didn't plan to change anything today," he said, "but I won't ignore it either." Maya felt her throat tighten. "You think they'll listen?" Jordan turned slightly toward her. "People listen when their silence becomes expensive." Maya exhaled with a quiet, stunned laugh. "You talk like someone who's done this before." Jordan paused, thoughtful. "I've dealt with systems," he said quietly. "But this is personal and public at the same time." He rose from his chair, picking up his briefcase. Eleanor looked worried. "Are you leaving?" Jordan replied. "I'm meeting them halfway." He walked toward the sliding doors that led deeper into the lounge, where corporate executives were scrambling, and where the next chapter of this conflict waited like a storm gathering strength. His steps were calm, his posture grounded. He didn't carry anger, he carried something far more powerful. Truth sharpened by experience, and the world was already watching. Jordan Miles followed Norman Grant through a quiet corridor leading deeper into the VIP wing. Each step felt like moving closer to something inevitable, though not unpredictable. The air inside that hallway was denser, as if carrying the weight of decisions being shaped behind closed doors. Beyond a glass partition, Jordan could see the silhouettes of several executives. They stood in a cluster, speaking urgently, their gestures sharp yet uncertain. Whatever script they had prepared earlier no longer felt adequate. Norman stopped at a doorway and turned toward Jordan. "They're waiting for you inside," he said softly. Jordan nodded in acknowledgement. "Thank you. Officer Grant." Norman stepped aside, letting him approach the room on his own. Jordan pushed the door open gently. Inside, the atmosphere felt tighter than the VIP lounge earlier. The lighting was brighter, exposing every crease on worried faces, every tapping finger, every shallow breath drawn by executives who understood the stakes were rising. Charles Redwood looked up immediately. His eyes held a mixture of relief and dread. "Mr. Miles, thank you for returning." Jordan walked to the table and took a seat without hurry. His movements remained calm, the same calm that had unsettled people throughout the day. It wasn't defiance. It was clarity, the kind that made people listen without being asked. This time, however, there were two new individuals in the room. One was a woman in a navy suit with streaks of silver in her hair. She sat upright, her presence radiating authority. The badge clipped to her blazer read, "Executive Leadership Committee." The other was a tall man with a measured expression, eyes sharp, demeanor controlled. He carried himself like someone used to dealing with crisis fallout. "Communications Chief," Jordan guessed, even before seeing his folder. Charles gestured toward them. "This is Margaret Sloan, our Chief Governance Officer, and Thomas Ward, Head of Executive Communications." Margaret inclined her head respectfully. "Mr. Miles," she said, "I've been fully briefed." Jordan responded with a quiet nod. Thomas folded his arms loosely, studying Jordan as though trying to read a complex equation. Charles cleared his throat. "We're here to discuss how to move forward. The situation has escalated significantly." Jordan offered no response. The silence prompted Charles to continue. "The video has gained several million views. News networks are requesting statements. Civil rights organizations are already tagging Skylux publicly." Jordan listened without expression. Margaret leaned forward slightly. "We want to handle this responsibly," she said, "but we also need clarity. You asked for a conversation with the board. May I ask why?" Jordan met her gaze directly. "Because what happened today is not an isolated incident. It's a reflection of your culture." Thomas shifted uncomfortably. Margaret remained still. Jordan continued. "You can discipline one employee. You can apologize to one customer, but that won't change what allowed this to happen in the first place." Linda Carrington, who had been silent until now, finally spoke. "We agree the situation requires structural review, but the scope of what you're asking, it's unprecedented." Jordan's voice softened. "Precedent isn't the measure of what's right." Charles pressed his palms together. "What exactly do you propose, Mr. Miles?" Jordan opened his briefcase once more. He withdrew the same black folder from earlier, placing it deliberately on the table. "This," he said. Margaret's eyes narrowed slightly as she read the silver text. "Miles Global Holdings Skylux Air Preliminary Structural Audit." Thomas inhaled a sharp breath. "You were auditing us for acquisition." Jordan nodded. "Ethical acquisitions, culture stability, human equity compliance. Those are the pillars we assess." Charles looked blindsided. "I didn't realize Miles Global was considering us." "I didn't announce it," Jordan replied. "I was here to observe operations before presenting findings to my board." Margaret straightened, and now Jordan regarded her calmly. "Now, I'm prepared to accelerate my report." Caleb Owen spoke in a near whisper. "A report based on the incident today," Jordan answered softly. "A report based on what today revealed." The room fell so silent the air conditioner could be heard humming in the corner. Margaret clasped her hands with intent. "If Miles Global issues a negative audit," she said carefully, "it will impact investor confidence significantly." Jordan didn't look away. "You seem more concerned about investors than people. For a public company, they are inseparable," Margaret replied. Jordan studied her for a long moment. She wasn't dismissive. She was honest, brutally so. That built a peculiar respect in him. He spoke clearly. You can protect your image or you can protect your integrity. One is temporary. The other is permanent. Thomas leaned forward, voice tense. What do you want us to do? Jordan's expression remained composed, but his words carried a new weight. I want systemic reform. I want training that reaches every corner of your organization. I want a framework that prevents assumptions from becoming policy. I want accountability measured, not promised. Charles swallowed. You're asking us to rebuild the core of our operations. Yes, Jordan said, because your core is what failed today. The truth struck hard, not cruelly, not aggressively, but undeniably. Margaret looked at the folder again. What is your next step? Jordan considered his answer carefully. I will tell my board that Skylux Air stands at a crossroads, and whether we continue evaluating your company depends on your willingness to face the truth. Thomas exhaled slowly, rubbing his forehead. Margaret glanced at Charles, then Linda, then Caleb, reading the fragile expressions on their faces. Finally, she asked the question that would tilt the direction of everything that followed. What would you need from us to attend a board session? Jordan held her gaze. Transparency, accountability, and a willingness to accept where you failed. Linda's throat tightened. Charles looked uncertain. But Margaret nodded. We can do that, she said quietly. Thomas's eyes widened. Margaret! She lifted a hand, silencing him. This company must choose its future, and refusing to evolve will cost far more than discomfort. Jordan watched her carefully. In her voice, he heard something rare in corporate leadership. Conviction. Not fear. Conviction. Margaret turned toward Jordan again. We will schedule a private board session. You can present your findings, your concerns, and your proposal. Jordan nodded once. I will attend. Norman, still standing near the doorway, released a breath he didn't realize he had been holding. Margaret rose to her feet. Mr. Miles, she said, thank you for not walking away. Jordan responded with quiet honesty. I've walked away from enough battles in my life. Not this one. The executives exchanged glances, the weight of what had just been set in motion pressing down on each of them. Margaret extended her hand. Then let this be the beginning of something better. Jordan stood and shook her hand, not with triumph, not with anger, but with a calm belief that change, when given the right spark, could shift an entire sky. When Jordan Miles stepped out of the executive conference room, the corridor outside felt strangely still, like the air was waiting for something to happen. The glass panels reflected his figure as he walked, briefcase in hand, posture upright, steps measured. There was no triumph in his expression, only clarity. He moved toward the lounge's seating area, where a few travelers sat scattered, unaware of the negotiations happening just beyond thin walls. Jordan paused at a large window overlooking the tarmac. A Skylux aircraft rolled toward the runway, its lights blinking against the fading glow. The plane's slow movement reminded him of how systems change. Reluctantly, cautiously, but inevitably. As he stood there, quiet footsteps approached from behind. It was Maya Lopez again. Her face held a mix of tension and relief. She had been watching from a distance, afraid to intrude but unable to walk away. Mr. Miles, she whispered, almost as if worried the silence might break. Did they listen to you? Jordan turned slightly and offered a small nod. In their way. Maya exhaled with a rush of emotion. People online are still posting. It hasn't slowed down. Jordan's eyes drifted toward her phone, the screen pulsing with notifications too fast to read. You've done something important, he said gently. Not for me. For everyone who has ever been told their truth was too inconvenient to hear. Maya lowered her eyes. moved by the unexpected validation. "I just wanted to show what actually happened," she said. "I didn't expect it to spread like this." "Truth travels," Jordan replied, "especially when silence has lasted too long." Before Maya could answer, a commotion erupted at the far side of the lounge near the private security checkpoint. The door opened sharply, and 3 crew members from Jordan's original flight stepped inside, accompanied by an operations manager who looked tense enough to crush paper in his hands. Jordan recognized them instantly. The first was the co-pilot, a quiet man with a worried expression. The second was a flight attendant from the forward cabin who had watched the confrontation earlier but said nothing. And the third, Cassandra Hale. She walked with stiff shoulders, her chin raised, as though posture alone could protect her from what she feared was coming. Her eyes scanned the lounge before landing on Jordan. A flicker of something passed through her expression. Not remorse, not anger, something closer to dread, wrapped in pride. The operations manager motioned them toward a side room, a glass-walled chamber used for internal reviews. Jordan wasn't meant to hear the conversation that followed, but the room's acoustics carried fragments of their voices through the quiet lounge. Maya stepped closer to Jordan, her curiosity too strong to suppress. "Are they having a disciplinary meeting?" she whispered. Jordan didn't answer. He wasn't sure if it was his place to listen, yet the scene unfolded openly enough that silence felt unnatural. Inside the room, the operations manager spoke first. "We've reviewed your preliminary reports," Cassandra replied defensively. "I acted within protocol." The manager shook his head. "The captain disagrees. Security disagrees. Passengers disagree. And the video contradicts your version entirely." Cassandra's breath came out sharp. "So now we're letting social media dictate internal policy?" "No," the manager said firmly. "We're letting truth dictate it." Cassandra went silent. Jordan watched her through the glass. Her face tightened, her jaw set. He saw fear in her eyes. But beneath that fear was something else. A struggle he recognized from people who had spent years trusting authority to shield them from consequences. The second attendant spoke quietly to the manager. "I didn't think she was wrong at first," she admitted. "I thought maybe the passenger had refused instructions. But when I rewatched the footage, I realized I stood there and said nothing. And that silence made things worse." Her voice trembled with something close to shame. Jordan felt a faint ache in his chest, not inflicted by her silence, but by the cost of it. The manager turned to Cassandra again. "You removed a paying passenger from the correct seat without verification. You escalated without cause. You misreported the event." Cassandra's voice rose. "I followed procedure." "No," the manager said softly. "You followed an assumption." Silence filled the room. Jordan could almost feel the moment Cassandra's defenses cracked barely, but enough to shift the air around her. Her next words were quiet, almost fragile. "I didn't think he belonged there." The manager closed his eyes briefly. "That's the problem." Jordan looked away for a moment, letting the weight settle. Maya stayed beside him, her breath unsteady. Inside the room, the co-pilot spoke. "I should have stepped in," he said. "I saw the tension building. I should have asked questions. I should have spoken." The manager nodded. Silence from those who know better can be as damaging as action from those who don't. Cassandra sank into a chair, her confidence finally cracking. She covered her face with one hand, but not in a way that asked for sympathy, more like someone mourning the version of themselves they believed they were. The operations manager gathered the reports. "You will receive formal notice of the company's decision within the hour," he said. "Further meetings will follow, but at this moment, you are relieved from duty." Cassandra looked up sharply. "All of us." "No," the manager said. "Just the ones who led the incident." The attendants exchanged glances. Cassandra swallowed hard. Her eyes drifted toward the glass, toward Jordan. For the first time since the incident began, she didn't look defensive. She looked human, hurt, confused, stripped of certainty. Jordan held her gaze with calm steadiness. Not vindication, not triumph. Simply truth meeting truth. The room emptied slowly. The attendants walked out first, followed by the manager. Cassandra lingered as if gathering the strength to move. When she finally stepped outside, her eyes flicked toward Jordan again. She hesitated, then approached him. Maya stiffened beside him, unsure what was coming. Cassandra stopped a few feet away. "Mr. Miles," she said quietly. Jordan didn't respond immediately. He waited. Cassandra's voice wavered. "I thought I was doing my job," Jordan answered softly. "Sometimes the hardest part of a job is seeing the person in front of you." Cassandra lowered her gaze. "I didn't see you. Not really." "That happens," Jordan said. "It's what we do after that matters." A tear slipped from the corner of her eye before she brushed it away quickly. Embarrassed. "I didn't expect this," she confessed. "The truth rarely asks permission," Jordan replied. Cassandra looked at him with something like regret. "I hope, someday, you can forgive me." Jordan inhaled slowly. "Forgiveness isn't the end of accountability," he said, "but it can be part of the beginning." Cassandra nodded, unable to speak again. She turned and walked toward the exit with unsteady steps. Maya exhaled deeply. "Wow," she whispered. "Just wow." Jordan remained still. He didn't feel satisfaction. He felt the weight of a truth that had finally been spoken aloud. The collapse of a system doesn't always begin with anger. Sometimes it begins with honesty. The executive transport car rolled along the service road of the airport, moving at a careful pace while the lights from hangars and maintenance bays shimmered across its polished exterior. Inside the back seat, Jordan Miles sat alone. His briefcase rested beside him, his hands folded loosely. Yet even in stillness, something deep worked beneath the surface, quiet but powerful. His mind returned to Cassandra Hale's last look before she walked away. Not defiant, not wounded pride. Something more complicated. A crack in certainty. A glimpse of a person confronting herself for the first time in years. Moments like that never brought him joy. They reminded him of how easy it was for people to lose sight of kindness when structure rewarded the opposite. The car slowed near a private terminal where Skylux executives waited. A row of tinted windows reflected tense silhouettes. Jordan could sense the unease gathering behind them. The driver opened the door gently. "They're ready for you." "Sir?" Jordan stepped out, feeling the weight of the day settle across his shoulders. He wasn't tired in the physical sense. The exhaustion was deeper, woven with the responsibility he knew was coming. Inside the terminal's conference suite, the senior leadership team stood in a half circle, some stiff with apprehension, others guilty, a few hopeful. Cameras had been banned from the room, phones surrendered. What remained was the raw space between truth and consequence. Charles Redwood was the first to speak. "Mr. Miles, thank you for agreeing to meet us again." Jordan took his place at the center of the room, unhurried. "I didn't come for an apology," he said softly. "I came for clarity." The words fell like water on stone, calm, but unyielding. Linda Carrington folded her arms, a gesture less defensive than contemplative. "We've concluded the preliminary internal review," she announced. "There were procedural violations, serious ones." Jordan waited. Linda continued, "But we also found something else. A pattern, not in the written rules, but in how some rules are interpreted. And that pattern aligns with what happened to you." A ripple of unease moved through the room. Jordan's voice remained steady. This isn't about punishing individuals. It's about addressing a habit the company overlooked for years. Thomas Ward cleared his throat, his tone weighted with honesty. The board is asking for your recommendation. They want to understand exactly what accountability should look like. Jordan walked toward the large window overlooking the runway. A Skylux aircraft ascended slowly, its engines humming like distant thunder. He watched the plane rise, carrying people who had no idea the fate of the company was being rewritten in a quiet terminal room. He spoke without turning around. Accountability begins with truth spoken aloud, even when it hurts. No one interrupted him. Jordan turned back to face them. The crew members involved have already been relieved from duty, but that isn't the end. The company must acknowledge that they didn't act alone. They acted inside a culture that allowed assumption to overshadow fact. Charles exhaled deeply. You want a public admission? A sincere one? Jordan replied. Not a press statement polished until it says nothing. Linda nodded slowly. You realize that will shake the industry. The industry needs shaking, Jordan said. Silence followed. A heavy, reflective silence that made several executives shift on their feet. Then Jordan added, more gently, this isn't about humiliation. It's about rebuilding trust. Trust you lost long before today. Linda's voice softened. What about the rest of the crew, the ones who didn't act but didn't intervene either? Jordan paused for a moment. The memory of the co-pilot admitting his silence echoed quietly in his mind. They should be retrained, he said, not punished. People cannot grow if given only fear. He walked to the nearest chair and sat down, his body finally allowing a small, weary sigh to escape. What you're facing isn't a PR crisis, he said. It's an identity crisis. The world is watching how you respond. But more importantly, your employees are watching. Charles lowered his gaze. You're right. Jordan leaned forward slightly. I'm not here to destroy Skylux. I'm here to help you become the company you thought you were. His tone remained tender, unhurried. The room shifted subtly, tension giving way to a quiet solidarity formed not through force, but through truth. Thomas stepped closer. Mr. Miles, he said, may I ask something personal? Jordan nodded. When you stood up on that plane, when you walked away, what were you thinking? Jordan looked down at his hands for a moment. His voice, when he answered, carried a rare vulnerability. I was thinking of a younger version of myself, he said. A kid who used to watch his father get spoken over, ignored, assumed lesser, and I promised myself that one day, if I ever had the strength, I would not let silence win. His throat tightened slightly, and when I was told I didn't belong in the seat I paid for, I realized that promise was being called. No one spoke. The room felt human, stripped of hierarchy. Jordan continued. I didn't walk off the plane for myself. I walked off for anyone who ever felt forced to shrink, just to keep the peace. Linda wiped a quiet tear before anyone noticed. Thomas stepped back, his voice composed again. We'll prepare the public statement. Transparent, direct, and we'll initiate a full overhaul of our employee training. We want your input in shaping it. Jordan rose to his feet. I'll help. But remember, accountability isn't a single meeting. It's a change of heart. Trust grows only when people see consistency. Charles nodded firmly. You have my word. Things will change. Jordan gave him a long, level look. Words matter. Actions matter more. The meeting concluded without dramatics. No handshakes, just an understanding carried in the eye contact shared across the room. As Jordan walked back toward the lounge exit, Maya Lopez appeared from a hallway bench. She had waited there quietly, unsure if she should leave or stay. When she saw him, she stood. "How did it go?" she asked softly. Jordan offered her a small smile, one carrying both exhaustion and peace. "They're listening now." Maya let out a shaky breath, relief warming her face. "That's good," she whispered. "Really good." Jordan looked at her with quiet gratitude. "You helped make that possible." Her eyes stung. "I just held up a phone." "You held up truth," Jordan said. "Not everyone has that kind of courage." A faint laugh escaped her. "I didn't feel courageous. I just felt like it was wrong to look away." Jordan nodded. "That's where courage begins." They walked toward the exit side by side, two strangers bound by a moment that had begun with humiliation but was now shifting into something unexpected, something bigger. The automatic doors opened, letting in a soft gust of wind. Inside that wind was the promise of what came next, and the quiet certainty that justice had finally begun to move. The headquarters of Skylux Aviation rose like a polished tower of glass above the city, its sharp lines catching reflections from the streets below. People often said the building looked like confidence carved into architecture. On this particular day, though, confidence was nowhere to be found inside its walls. The boardroom on the top floor carried a quiet tension. Screens glowed across the long table. News outlets displayed footage of the incident in looping segments, each one dissected by commentators, each one gathering thousands of reactions every passing minute. Linda Carrington stood near the far end of the room, flipping through printed reports while her jaw tightened in concentration. Charles Redwood paced slowly, hands behind his back, as though searching for a footing he had lost. Thomas Ward entered with a tablet clutched in one hand. "Numbers are climbing again," he murmured. "Two more networks picked it up, and the morning shows are planning segments." Charles shook his head. "The public thinks they know what happened, but they only saw the surface." Linda corrected him gently. "They saw enough." Before more could be said, the doors opened and Jordan Miles stepped inside. Every executive straightened instinctively. His presence didn't demand attention, it invited it, calmly, quietly, with a weight that made people reevaluate themselves. Jordan took a seat, placed his briefcase beside him, and looked around the room. His gaze held no accusation, yet every person felt exposed. Charles cleared his throat. "Mr. Miles, thank you for coming. The board is ready to hear your position on the next steps." Jordan nodded once. "This is not a crisis you fix with policy alone," he said softly. "It's a crisis that began long before I stepped on Flight 471. Linda leaned forward. "We're ready to listen." Jordan rested his palms on the table, gathering his thoughts with intention. His voice was even and measured, his tone low enough that the executives had to lean in, drawn not by volume but by gravity. "What happened to me," he said, "was not a surprise to anyone who has lived their life being doubted without cause." He paused. What made it different this time was that someone was brave enough to record it. The weight of that truth settled across the room. Thomas spoke carefully. "We've reviewed the internal bias reports from the last 5 years. There were warnings. Incidents that were dismissed as customer misunderstandings or personality conflicts." Jordan closed his eyes briefly. "I suspected as much." Linda tapped one of the documents. "The crew involved in your case, 3 of them filed previous complaints about the culture on their team. Not about passengers, about each other, about favoritism, about inconsistent accountability. We overlooked patterns because they didn't affect operations, or so we thought." Jordan looked up, his voice gentler now. "Bias rarely begins with passengers. It begins with how employees treat each other." That truth lingered in the air like a mirror no one wanted to face. Charles sat heavily in his chair. "What do you recommend?" he asked. Jordan took a moment before responding. "You need a transformation committee, not a PR group, Not a legal shield. A team empowered to evaluate your company from top to bottom. Policies, training, reporting systems, leadership behavior. Linda nodded slowly. You're suggesting structural reform. I'm suggesting survival. Jordan corrected softly. Because this will not be the last incident unless you change the environment that made it possible. For a moment, no one moved. Then Thomas stepped closer to the table. And who should lead such a committee? Jordan looked at him quietly. You. The room reacted with subtle surprise. Even Linda glanced up. Thomas blinked, taken aback. Me. You were the first to ask what accountability looks like, Jordan said. You asked with sincerity, not strategy. That's where change begins. Thomas lowered his gaze, humbled. I will do it, he said. Jordan offered a slight nod, but not alone. He turned his attention to Linda. You've studied your own data honestly. You should co-lead. Her posture straightened with a mixture of resolve and responsibility. We'll do it, she said. Jordan looked around the table. But before any of this is announced, you must address something important. Charles leaned forward. What's that? Jordan clasped his hands. Your employees are scared. Not of punishment. Of being blamed for things they didn't do. Of being painted as villains. You need to speak to them before you speak to the world. Linda swallowed. You think they'll listen? Jordan smiled faintly. If you speak from truth, yes. He rose from his seat and stepped toward the window, the skyline stretching wide before him. You must tell them that this isn't a witch hunt. It's an awakening, and that everyone has a role in rebuilding trust. He turned back. People respond to sincerity more than perfection. Charles nodded, absorbing the message. We'll draft a statement for the employees first, he said, then the public announcement. Jordan shook his head gently. No drafts. Speak live. Speak real. Silence swept through the room. Linda exhaled slowly. That will terrify our communications department. Jordan offered a warm, almost amused look. That's how you know it'll work. A quiet laugh rippled around the table, breaking the tension long enough for hope to enter the space. Thomas sat down beside him. Mr. Miles. Jordan. I know you didn't choose to become the symbol of this crisis, but we want to thank you for not turning your back on us. Jordan looked at him with a tenderness that held no resentment. I'm not here as a victim, he said. I'm here as someone who believes people can choose to do better. Linda murmured softly. You make it sound simple. Jordan smiled lightly. It's not simple, but it is possible. The room shifted with a quiet sense of purpose. As the executives prepared to transition into action, Jordan walked toward the door. His steps were steady, serene, carrying the weight of the world with a grace that came only from years of learning to hold pain without letting it own him. Before leaving, he looked back. One last thing, he said. Everyone turned. When you speak to the public, don't talk about me. Talk about the passengers who never had a camera to defend them. Talk about the people who lost their voices long before this incident. Let this moment honor them too. The words hit harder than anything he had said yet. Linda pressed her lips together, moved. We will, she promised. Jordan nodded once more, then stepped out of the room. As the door closed, the executives felt something they hadn't expected. Not fear, not shame, responsibility, a quiet, steady responsibility that asked for the kind of courage that doesn't come with applause. Inside that responsibility, the work toward redemption finally began. The internal auditorium of Skylux Aviation had never felt so full, though the rows of chairs were spaced generously and the quiet carpet softened every footstep. Employees from flight operations, customer service, scheduling, engineering, and security filled the space. Some stood against the back wall, arms crossed. Others leaned forward with apprehension. A few clutched coffee cups like anchors. The atmosphere carried a weight that was not entirely fear. It was the heaviness of a company waiting to hear who it really was. The leadership team entered in a single line. No dramatic music. No choreographed announcement. Just a group of executives who, for the first time in a long while, looked human rather than corporate. When Jordan Miles followed them into the room, a subtle murmur swept through the crowd. Many recognized him from news clips, others from the internal bulletins, but seeing him in person shifted something. He was not the symbol on the headlines. He was a man standing calmly, carrying silence as though it were a form of truth. The front lights dimmed, the stage lights brightened. Charles Redwood approached the podium, palms steadying the edges as if grounding himself. "Thank you all for being here," he began. "We asked for this meeting because there has been too much happening outside these walls for us to ignore what is happening inside them." A few employees exchanged uneasy glances. Charles continued. "We know you've seen the coverage. We know you've heard interpretations that paint this company in ways that feel painful, unfair, or overwhelming." He paused, "and we know many of you have asked, what does this mean for us?" The room leaned forward. Linda Carrington stepped beside him, her voice clear. "We want to speak to you directly. No press releases, no rehearsed speeches, just honesty." She inhaled. "It is true that a Skylux crew mishandled a situation involving a passenger. The incident was not just procedural failure. It revealed something deeper, a culture that allowed assumption to outweigh respect, a moment where our uniform meant power without awareness." She looked out toward the crowd, her expression vulnerable. "This isn't about blaming every employee. This is about recognizing how easy it is for the wrong habits to grow when the right values are not reinforced." A murmur of agreement rolled through a few rows. Jordan stood at the side of the stage, listening. His hands remained loosely clasped, his stance relaxed yet anchored. Charles resumed. "The Transformation Committee is being formed today. It will reshape training, reporting systems, promotion practices, and leadership evaluation. This will not be a quick fix." His voice lowered. "It will be a commitment." The room stayed silent, absorbing every word. Linda added gently, "We also know there is fear. Many of you worry you'll be judged for mistakes you never made. We want to be clear about something." Her tone sharpened with resolve. "This change is not a hunt. It is a mirror, and everyone, including leadership, must look into it." There was a long pause, followed by scattered nods across the crowd. Finally, Charles stepped aside. "Jordan," he said quietly, "they need to hear from you too." Jordan walked to the podium with a pace that carried no urgency, yet somehow commanded all attention. No one shifted in their seat. Even the overhead ventilation seemed to quiet. He looked out at the faces before him, some guarded, some hopeful, some weighed by guilt they had not earned, all waiting to understand the man at the center of the storm. Jordan began softly. "I didn't come here to demand punishment." People leaned in. "I didn't come to shame anyone either." A few shoulders lowered in relief. "I came because what happened to me on Flight 4171 isn't just about one flight. It's about the quiet things that build up over years, the things no one names because naming them feels too heavy." He looked toward the back rows where ground staff stood with arms folded. "I know what it feels like to be doubted the moment you step into a space. I know what it feels like to have your intentions questioned before you speak. Many of you do too, even if your reasons are different." Silence deepened. "But I also know something else." His gaze softened. "Most people want to do right. Most people want to treat others with dignity. What they lack isn't goodness, it's awareness." An older baggage handler swallowed hard, eyes glistening. Jordan continued. What happened on that flight hurt me, but it also reminded me why change cannot be postponed any longer. He placed his hand gently on the podium. Your leadership team is choosing a harder path, one that asks all of us to be accountable, not just when someone is watching, but when we think no one will ever know. The words settled into the room like warm air after a long, cold spell. Jordan's voice remained steady. I'm asking you to be part of that, not out of fear, out of pride. Pride in the kind of company you want to be. A low wave of emotion pulsed through the audience. A flight attendant near the front suddenly raised her hand, her voice trembling. What about the people who stayed silent? People like me. I wasn't on that flight, but we've all seen things we didn't speak up about. Jordan regarded her with gentle understanding. Silence is easy, he said, but so is the first small step toward courage. She nodded slowly, tears forming. A ramp technician called out from the back. Do you think people can really change? Jordan smiled, a warm but grounded smile. I've spent my life watching people surprise themselves. Yes, change is possible, but not because we force it, because we choose it. A sudden applause began from somewhere in the middle of the room, small at first, then growing, then rolling through the entire space until the auditorium vibrated with unity, relief, and a fragile but real sense of hope. Jordan stepped back, letting the applause belong to them. For the first time since the incident, the company wasn't reacting out of fear. It was breathing. It was waking up. When the noise softened, Charles returned to the podium. We begin training next week, he said. Not as punishment, as preparation for a better version of who we can be, Linda added warmly. Our goal is not to erase mistakes. It's to make sure we learn from them. The room exhaled collectively, the tension dissolving into something steadier, something healthier. As employees began to rise and speak to each other, Jordan walked toward the exit. He felt no triumph, only a quiet gratitude, the kind of gratitude that came from watching a group of people confront their own reflection and not turn away. Maya Lopez was waiting near the doorway. She had been invited to observe, though she stayed mostly unnoticed at the back. That was something, she whispered. Jordan nodded. They're beginning to understand. She studied him. And you? How are you holding up? Jordan paused, searching the distant hum of the building. I'm tired, he said honestly, but I'm hopeful. Maya smiled gently. That's enough for now. Jordan returned the smile, a rare softness lighting his eyes. As they stepped into the hallway, the sound of employees talking, connecting, and promising each other better echoed behind them. For the first time, the air inside Skylux headquarters felt different, lighter, alive, and the path toward change felt less like a burden and more like a beginning. The glass exterior of Skylux headquarters reflected a world in uproar. News vans crowded the sidewalks. Reporters stood shoulder to shoulder. Microphones pressed forward as though trying to capture the conscience of a corporation through thin air. Pedestrians slowed their steps. Phones lifted to record the scene they could not look away from. Inside, the atmosphere carried a different weight. Not loud, not chaotic. Heavy in a quieter, more complicated way. The leadership team gathered once more in the executive chamber, the room lit by a soft, indirect glow that made each face appear older, more etched with responsibility. Caleb Owens clicked through the live newsfeed displayed on the central screen. Each headline pulsed like a warning siren. Skylux faces public outrage over bias incident. Activists call for airline reform. Congressional committee requests official review. Charles Redwood pressed his fingertips into the table, grounding himself against the rising tide. This is spreading faster than we can manage, he muttered. Linda Carrington exhaled slowly. We cannot manage it. Not in the traditional sense. The old methods won't work for what this is." Thomas nodded with grim acceptance. "The world is not reacting to a singular mistake," he said. "They're reacting to a pattern they recognize too well." Before anyone replied, the door opened and Jordan Miles entered the room. His presence cut through the tension without effort, still calm, still steady. Yet something in his expression had thickened, as though he carried the weight of every voice outside the building. Everyone rose instinctively. Jordan offered a soft gesture, asking them to sit. "I saw the coverage," he said. "It's harsh, but it's not unfounded." Charles straightened in his chair. "We're preparing a public statement, one that addresses the incident and outlines our change plan." Jordan studied him for a long, thoughtful moment. "Then you must understand what the public is really waiting for," he said. "They're not looking for eloquence. They're looking for honesty, unvarnished, uncomfortable, real." Caleb cleared his throat. "Honesty that raw could expose us to legal risk." Jordan turned toward him gently. "Honesty that raw could also save you." Silence rippled across the room, a silence that felt less like fear and more like awakening. Thomas leaned forward. "What do you think we should say?" Jordan walked slowly toward the window. Outside, a helicopter hovered nearby, its blades sending vibrations through the glass. He watched it a moment, the city sprawling in restless motion beneath it. "You must acknowledge the failure without moving too quickly into solutions," he said. "People need to feel that you understand their hurt before they will trust your intentions. If you try to fix things before naming what happened, they will see it as strategy, not sincerity." Linda nodded, her eyes filling with a clarity tinged with humility. "He's right," she whispered. "We can't rush past the truth." Charles rubbed his forehead. "Then how do we handle the pressure, the calls for firings, the lawsuits forming, the possibility of government intervention?" Jordan faced them again. "You handle it by changing the question." They watched him, waiting. Instead of asking, "How do we protect ourselves?" ask, "How do we honor the people we serve?" That shift will lead you to the right decisions. The executives absorbed his words like students learning a language they should have known all along. Caleb turned the screen to a different window. "There's more," he said hesitantly. "A civil rights coalition has released a statement demanding accountability. They specifically mentioned your name, Jordan." Jordan said nothing, though a shadow of awareness passed through his eyes. "They're asking whether you plan to pursue legal action. They're also calling on you to take a more public leadership role in addressing discrimination in aviation." The room waited to see how he would respond. He spoke softly, but with unmistakable depth. "People expect me to fight with anger, but anger alone doesn't build anything. It only burns." He let the words settle. "What I want is not a headline. What I want is change that lasts, change that won't disappear once the cameras turn away." Linda looked at him with gratitude and quiet sorrow. "You shouldn't have had to carry this burden." Jordan smiled faintly. "I've carried this burden my whole life. Today just made it visible. No one could speak for a moment." Then the door opened again, and Maya Lopez stepped inside. She had been invited to join the meeting, though she moved with hesitation, unsure if she belonged in a room so polished, so guarded. Jordan turned toward her, his expression warming. "Maya, thank you for coming." She nodded shyly. "I wasn't sure if you still wanted me here." "I did," Jordan said gently. "Your voice matters, too." Maya stepped forward, clutching her notebook slightly too tight. Her nerves were visible, yet her presence carried something unmistakably honest. Linda gestured toward an empty seat. "Please, join us." Maya sat, looking around before speaking. "I've been reading the comments online," she said softly. "People are angry, not just at the crew, at the whole system. They're saying this isn't just an airline problem and it's a society problem. Jordan nodded. And they're right. She swallowed. So, what can we do? Jordan looked at her with a gentleness that encouraged courage in return. We start by telling the truth. All of it, not the version that protects comfort. Maya blinked back, a sudden heat behind her eyes. I just keep thinking about what I saw on that plane, she said. How quiet it became. How everyone seemed to wait for someone else to do the right thing. She lowered her gaze. I don't want to be one of those people again. Her words struck the room with a power none expected. Jordan spoke softly. You weren't. You acted. You did what many people wished they could. Maya inhaled shakily. I didn't feel brave. I felt scared. Jordan smiled with deep understanding. That's what makes it bravery. Charles looked between them, something loosening in his expression. The public needs to hear her perspective, he said. Linda agreed. She represents the human side of this story, the part that's not polished by corporate language. Caleb hesitated. You want her included in the address? Jordan turned toward him. I want the truth included, wherever it comes from. Another silence settled over the room, but this one carried possibility. Finally, Charles stood. We will speak to the public, not with a script, with sincerity. Thomas nodded, and we will show them the plan, the real one, not a symbolic gesture. Linda looked at Jordan, and with your guidance, maybe, we can rebuild what was broken. Jordan's eyes softened. Not rebuild, he said quietly. Reform. Rebuilding is what you do when something falls by accident. This did not fall by accident. Every executive felt the weight of that truth. Jordan finished gently. This fell because someone finally refused to stay seated. Maya exhaled, her gaze meeting his with gratitude that needed no words. Outside the glass walls, the storm of cameras and commentary raged on. Inside, the reckoning had begun. The press hall of Skylux Aviation had never held such a charged stillness. Rows of seats filled quickly as journalists whispered among themselves, passing notes, adjusting microphones, angling cameras with the precision of people who sensed history preparing to unfold. Screens along the side walls streamed live feeds from major news outlets. Every headline displayed variations of the same question. What will Skylux say at the very front? A modest podium stood beneath the company's emblem. No banners, no decorative staging, just bare truth waiting to be spoken. Behind the podium, Jordan Miles watched the scene through a side entrance. He stood with hands in his pockets, posture relaxed, expression contemplative. He did not seem anxious, though a quiet current of anticipation coursed beneath his calm exterior. Maya Lopez stood beside him. She kept smoothing the pages of a small notebook even though she did not need it. Her nerves had gathered in her hands. Do you think people will listen? She asked quietly. Jordan turned to her. Voice steady. People always listen when the truth arrives without armor. She let the words settle, steadying her breathing. Down the hall. Charles Redwood, Linda Carrington, and Thomas Ward conferred in low voices, rehearsing nothing, reviewing no script. Their expressions carried the gravity of people preparing to step into a mirror. A staff member approached. They're ready for you. The four walked toward the stage. Jordan followed at a measured distance, not as the main speaker, but as the silent center of gravity around whom this moment existed. As they stepped into the lights, the crowd hushed. The only sound came from the clicking of cameras and the faint hum of broadcast equipment. Charles reached the podium first. He adjusted the microphone and scanned the room. His throat tightened briefly before he found his voice. Thank you for being here. He paused, letting the opening breathe. We called this conference because the public deserves answers. Our passengers deserve answers. And, most importantly, The people affected by what happened on Flight 4171 deserve truth. A ripple of stillness spread across the room. Charles continued. An incident occurred involving a valued customer, Mr. Jordan Miles. That incident was handled poorly. It exposed a failure in our culture, not just in procedure. And today, we are not going to hide behind corporate language or excuses. Linda stepped forward, her voice clear, her tone gentle yet unwavering. We are here to acknowledge wrongdoing, not isolated, not random. Wrongdoing that reflects deeper issues we should have confronted sooner. A journalist raised a hand, but Charles lifted a palm slightly. Please, allow us to speak fully first. Linda glanced toward Jordan, her eyes carrying gratitude and quiet resolve. The man affected showed more dignity than we deserved. He did not shout. He did not threaten. He did not escalate. Instead, he showed us exactly who we are when no one is watching. A faint murmur drifted through the press rows. Thomas stepped to the mic next. We reviewed every detail of the incident. We saw the assumptions. We saw the silence. We saw behaviors that contradict the values we claim to stand for, and we take full responsibility. He swallowed, aware of the recording lights aimed at him. We cannot undo what happened, but we can commit to transformation. The words hung heavily in the air. Linda spoke again, this time with something close to emotion. Before we discuss reforms, you must understand something important. This would not have come to light without the courage of a young passenger who recorded what she witnessed. She gestured gently toward Maya Lopez. A quiet gasp passed across the room. Cameras swung toward her. Maya stiffened instinctively, gripping her notebook, her heart racing. She had not expected to be introduced this early. Charles stepped aside. Maya, if you're willing, we'd like you to share what you saw, in your own words. Jordan turned toward her. She met his eyes. The nod he gave her was small, but full of encouragement. Maya walked to the podium. Her steps were careful, as though each one carried a weight she had never practiced carrying. She looked out at the sea of faces. A silence stretched, not pressuring her, simply waiting. Her voice emerged soft but steady. I was just a passenger. I didn't know anyone on that flight. I didn't expect anything unusual to happen. She drew a slow breath. But when I saw a man being questioned, then pushed out of his seat for no reason he could defend himself against, something inside me said I couldn't just sit there. Her hands shook slightly. She steadied them on the podium. I didn't take out my phone because I wanted drama. I took it out because I was thinking about how many times things like this happen when no one records them. The room absorbed her words in silence. I saw a man treated like he didn't belong. I saw other passengers look away. I felt that same instinct, the one that says, stay quiet, stay out of trouble. But the moment I lifted my phone, that feeling changed. She paused, eyes softening. I wanted to give truth a witness. Her voice trembled, but did not break, and I'm glad I did. Cameras clicked. A few journalists lowered their devices, almost reverently. Jordan watched her from the side, pride and empathy blending in his expression. When Maya stepped back, Charles returned to the podium. Thank you, Maya. He turned to the crowd. And now, we want to speak about what comes next. Linda raised a formal document. This is the Skylux Transformation Commitment, effective immediately. Journalists leaned forward. We are implementing comprehensive bias training across all departments. We are restructuring internal reporting. We are creating an independent oversight board with external civil rights advisors. And we are inviting Mr. Jordan Miles to serve as senior advisor for inclusion ethics. A wave of murmurs swept through the room. Jordan remained composed, though a hint of emotion flickered in his eyes. Thomas added gently, He did not ask for this role. We asked him. because change requires guidance from those who have lived what others only try to understand. The press hall fell silent again. Charles stepped back from the podium. And now, Mr. Miles has agreed to say a few words. Jordan approached with the quiet confidence of someone who had never needed a stage to command attention. He stood at the microphone. For a moment, he said nothing, letting the room breathe. Then he spoke. I didn't want fame to come from this, and I didn't want a title. I wanted fairness. He exhaled softly. I came onto that plane as a regular passenger. I left it as a reminder that dignity is not a privilege. It is a right. He looked around at the many faces staring back at him. But this isn't about me. It's about every person who has ever been judged before they had a chance to speak. Every traveler who learned to lower their expectations just to get through their day. Every person who deserved better. His voice deepened. If Skylux truly wants to change, I will help. Not as a victim, but as a partner in building something better. He paused. A company does not earn trust through apologies. It earns trust through consistency. The room listened, unmoving. I believe Skylux can rise again. Not because it is flawless, but because it's finally willing to tell the truth. A single clap echoed into the silence, then another. Then the entire room erupted into applause that surged like a wave breaking open. Jordan stepped back. Maya watched him with tears in her eyes. Outside, helicopters recorded the scene through the glass. Inside, the air felt different. It felt cleansed, as though the sky itself had paused to listen. In the days following the press conference, the world reacted with a force Skylux Aviation had never faced. Not all reactions were kind. Some questioned whether the reforms were sincere. Some insisted the company was only trying to protect its profits. Others applauded the transparency and called it a blueprint for corporate responsibility. Yet, beyond the noise, something deeper unfolded. Inside Skylux headquarters, there was a shift that could not be measured on stock charts or trending hashtags. Employees began speaking to each other differently. Conversations carried less defensiveness, more curiosity. People who once moved through hallways with hurried avoidance now paused to hold doors for one another. It was subtle, yet unmistakable. Jordan Miles watched it all unfold from a quiet corner office temporarily designated for him. The room overlooked the city. Stretching toward distant runways where planes lifted into open sky, he often stood by the window, watching the aircraft rise, a gentle weight settling into his chest each time. He hadn't asked for this responsibility, but he accepted it with the steadiness of someone who understood that change is rarely convenient. A soft knock sounded at the door. "Come in," Jordan said. Maya Lopez entered, clutching a folder to her chest. She seemed more at ease in the building now, though a modest humility remained in her posture. "They want us downstairs," she said, "in the training wing. The first full session starts soon." Jordan nodded. "Are you ready?" Maya gave a little laugh. "Not really, but I think that's how you know you're doing something worthwhile." He smiled. "You're learning quickly." They walked together toward the elevators. Employees passing in the hallway acknowledged them with warm nods, some with gratitude, others with thoughtful caution. Every gesture held the awareness that something important was unfolding, and they were part of it. When the elevator doors opened onto the training level, a soft hum of conversation greeted them. Dozens of employees waited outside a newly renovated classroom. Screens on the walls displayed a simple phrase in gentle lettering. "Every person matters." A breath seemed to ripple through the crowd when Jordan stepped into view. Some approached him to express appreciation. Others looked on quietly, processing emotions they did not yet have words for. Linda Carrington greeted them near the doorway. "Thank you for coming," she said. This first session sets the tone for everything that follows. Jordan nodded. I'm honored to be a part of it. Linda turned to Maya, her expression sincere. And thank you for accepting our invitation to co-facilitate. Your voice carries something real. People feel it. Maya blinked, touched. I'll do my best, she whispered. The room fell silent as the session began. Jordan stood at the front with Linda and Maya beside him. He looked at the employees gathered before him. They came from every department. Some wore crisp uniforms. Some wore casual shirts with ID badges clipped to their pockets. All carried a mixture of curiosity, tension, and cautious hope. Jordan began. We're not here to learn how to avoid mistakes. We're here to understand each other. And understanding begins when we stop assuming and start listening. He stepped aside so Maya could speak. Her voice trembled at first, but steadied. I'm not a trainer, she said. I'm just someone who saw something wrong and couldn't look away. She let that truth settle. And I think that's the beginning of accountability. Not grand speeches, not perfect behavior, just choosing not to look away. The employees leaned in, the weight of her sincerity pulling them closer. Linda guided the discussion next, sharing insights from internal data. Not charts meant to shield decisions, but candid numbers showing gaps, patterns, and blind spots. People reacted with surprise, discomfort, even guilt. Jordan watched, not with judgment, with empathy. During a break, a young flight attendant approached Jordan. Her eyes were soft with vulnerability. I used to think speaking up would cost me my job, she whispered. But now, I think staying silent might cost us something bigger. Jordan placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. Courage grows slowly, he said. But once it appears, it never leaves you. Later, a maintenance technician approached with hesitation. Sir, I've never been treated badly, but I've seen others treated unfairly. I didn't know how to help. Jordan met his eyes. You help by starting today. Every moment gives you another chance. The technician nodded, grateful. By the end of the session, the room felt different. People who had entered with apprehension now wore expressions of reflection and unity. The seed of change had taken root. As employees began filing out, Charles Redwood arrived quietly. How did it go? He asked. Linda exhaled with relief. Better than I dared hope. Charles looked at Jordan. You've changed this place more in a week than some of us did in 20 years. Jordan smiled softly. I didn't change it. People decided to see themselves clearly. That's where transformation begins. Charles hesitated. There's something else. Jordan waited. We heard from Cassandra Hale. A stillness moved through Jordan's chest. She asked if she could meet with you privately. Charles said. Maya glanced up, worry flickering across her face. Jordan considered the request. He remembered Cassandra's trembling voice during the disciplinary meeting. The fear, the regret barely forming beneath layers of pride. He nodded. Arrange it. A few hours later, Jordan found himself in a small conference room. Cassandra entered slowly, her posture subdued. No confidence, no uniform, no shield. For a moment, they simply looked at each other. Then Cassandra spoke. I've replayed that day 100 times, she whispered. I thought I was keeping order. I thought I was doing my job. Jordan listened quietly. But the truth is, I was afraid. Afraid of losing control. Afraid of being challenged. Afraid of being wrong. Her voice cracked, and that fear made me treat you like you were less than a person. Jordan's expression carried no anger. Fear doesn't excuse harm, he said gently, but acknowledging it is the first step to healing. Tears filled her eyes. I don't expect forgiveness. Jordan shook his head. Forgiveness isn't owed. It grows. Cassandra covered her mouth, overwhelmed. He continued softly. Use this pain. Let it shape you into someone who sees people clearly. Someone who never repeats this mistake. She nodded slowly, tears slipping down her face. I will. When she left, Jordan sat alone for a while, letting the moment settle into the deeper parts of him. It did not bring triumph. It brought peace. Later that evening, he and Maya walked outside the headquarters building. The sky above them was streaked with fading light, and a Skylux plane ascended in the distance. Maya watched it rise. Do you think things will really change? She asked quietly. Jordan looked up with her. Yes, he said. Because change doesn't begin in boardrooms or press halls. It begins in people. People deciding to see each other differently. She smiled softly. You really believe that? I've seen it happen today, he replied. The plane climbed higher, its lights blinking like a promise against the dimming sky. Jordan spoke again, voice low, warm, steady. When dignity is protected, everyone rises. Maya closed her eyes briefly, letting those words settle in her heart. They stood together in the calm evening air, two ordinary people who had stepped into extraordinary responsibility. High above them, the plane soared into open sky. And for the first time since the incident began, the world felt a little lighter, a little fairer, a little more capable of healing. Jordan Miles's story reminds us that self-esteem is not a luxury. It is the core part that every person maintains to walk steadily in life. No matter how successful we are, we can still face moments of being overlooked, judged based on appearance or prejudice. But how we choose to react is what creates true value. Jordan did not choose to be noisy, nor let anger decide his actions. He chose calmness, chose dialogue, chose a way of doing things that anyone looking back would respect. And it is that powerful calmness that makes people around him look back at themselves, makes a large corporation change, makes society think. In life, sometimes we cannot control how others see us, but we can always control how we respond. Every time we stand up for what is right, no matter how small, no matter how silent, the world around us is a little better. Remember, big changes sometimes start with a very small action. The act of keeping your own dignity. Thank you for taking the time to follow this meaningful story. If you find the story touching you or makes you think from a new perspective, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next emotional and valuable journeys. Your support gives me more motivation to tell more profound stories. See you in the next video.